would like to welcome everybody. This is one of the things I'd like to do pretty much the first week of every month, where we bring on, I would guess, what we try and do with Stocks to Trade University is have, a learning environment where we can learn from everybody. And basically, we did it about a couple months ago when I sent out all the links. I hope everybody checked it out. And what we're going to do tonight is basically have Tango as a guest, a guest lecturer. So I'm sure all of you have been in a high school class or a college class where they bring in somebody, maybe you're in, whatever, the mathematics department, and they get somebody that comes in from the math area that's out in the industry. Or in Tango's consideration, maybe you're in baking school and they bring a guy that's a baker. So, not going to give really any background because we did that 2 months ago. It was a great webinar. If you're watching this one recorded, be sure to check that one out because he gave all of his background, what got him into trading, all of that. And then we've got all the other resources. So again, if you're watching this one after the fact, please watch the original one as well as read all of Auspec's research's twit longers, because that's what Tango's gonna expound on tonight. And if you just dive into this webinar without doing that yet, you're probably gonna be like, what's he talking about, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So Tango, my man, you ready?
Yeah, so can you guys hear me? Just want to make sure everybody can hear.
Yeah? Yep, I got you. Yep. So
alrighty, guys. So we're going to kind of dive directly into this. I do have I have 7 screens total, so I have things kind of staged up. So I'll be bringing things across. First, let me see how to switch over to my desktop here. On to send questions. I have the Stock to Trade Pro chat pulled up. And then if you guys, what I'll do is I will read the question and then I will repeat it back in for anybody who's watching this later. So basically, I want to share with you guys my reverse stock theory. The reason why it's because it's theory is because it's always evolving. Just like the stock market, there's new things that you're going to learn and you're going to become more fine-tuned. As Tim Bowen says, we're sharpening the sword to be able to become a better trader. This is the reason why I call it a theory is because it's based on facts and certain assumptions based upon more experienced traders that I have had one-on-one conversations with. I've had the wonderful honor of working with Tim Bowen where we did some Skype sessions and just kind of talking through it. When I was beginning this process of doing that, I really knew I was on something big because Tim Bowen totally perked up on this whole process. So that I think that was a big compliment to be able to do that. The reason why I am sharing this with you today is because I remember being new stock trading and wondering the whys of a supernova, why a really bad company can move up so much. This is my accumulation of the past 2 years of busting my ass studying all the materials from Timothy Sykes' Challenge, Stocks to Trade Pro sessions, plus countless books that I've purchased and read over the past 2 years. According to my calculations, I've spent a little bit over $22,000 investing into myself. Instead of holding this information back, I'm adding this information to the collection of the STT Pro webinars and taking an open source outlook on this information. So the biggest thing for me is I'm a computer programmer at heart. I've created some amazing programs that were used by DHL, UPS, FedEx, the Postal Service. At the time, I was approached by all those companies, and they said, well, we'll pay you $200,000 to start with, pay travel to around the country, but the only thing is you have to leave the bakery. I wasn't willing to leave the bakery. So my programming is out in the world with people be able to using my code. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. I should have been making a little bit over $250,000 a year programming and setting this up, but I got use a lot of open source information to be able to make me a better programmer using libraries. So that's kind of my frame of thought for this. If you guys find, instead of me selling you DVD or selling you this whole theory, up front and just telling you, hey, and then maybe you'll get the information you want with it. You know, instead of doing that way, I'm doing it the opposite way, where I'm sending a Vimo code. If you guys find anything of value of this, I know a lot of you guys are struggling with money just to create your account. If you want to send me $10 or $5 saying, hey man, that was really good information, that's great. If you actually hit a home run trade with this information, you know, send a little bit my way, because this is where the information came from. The other thing too is I hope you guys can be able to take this information as a basic and then add this, and then be able to share this down the future with other Stock to Trade Pro members. So you can take this as your library of computer programming, and then add this to your theory, and then keep on making this involved so we can be able to make this even better and better. So that's my little chip out there. Of course, I am not a professional whatsoever. I'm a student just like you. I am going through the whole process of becoming a better trader. But the idea behind this is that there's so much short bias in the market, and you know, the edge is on the short side, but you really can't build a small account with the short side. You have to have a big amount of money to be able to do that. So my idea is, can we find the trades that are supernovas that you only can do maybe like 5,000 shares with and make like $40,000 on it? That's the theory. That's kind of like the idea, the premises with it. So the very beginning of my stock trading career, when I joined Stock to Trade Pro, which was in September of 2016, is when Tim Bowen was just getting started with it. Tim Bowen has this hated stock list, and I was a very newbie trader, and I kept on bugging Tim Bowen about this stock called SSH, and Tim Bowen's like, no, just ignore it. It's a crap company. It's crap. And something about it kept on making me go back to it. So I decided to buy like 100 shares at 17 cents, and they were going through this thing called NASDAQ delisting, and Tim Bowen said, NASDAQ delisting is for crap companies who want to trade it. And 2 weeks later, it jumped from 17 cents to 80 cents. I sold it, and that was my biggest trade to date. I made a whopping $80 in profit. I want you guys to remember, it's not the amount of profit that matters. It's the shares. It's a cents per share that you make. And don't ever forget that whole point of what we're doing here. So if you can trade 100 shares and make 80 cents off of it, if you can repeat it, you can do 30,000 shares and make 80 cents off of it. That's where the whole power of everything that we're doing is. So that's what got me curious about it, but it was always on the back burner of my head. SSH has now become CHFS, CHFS, which is a crap company that we always trade. We see it pop up on the scanners, but yeah, it's a crap company. At the same time of CHFS, there was a stock pretty rapid, creating all kinds of chaos. That is the legend stock, Drives. Everybody talks about it, and everybody always gets excited. It's a shipper. It's a shipper. The shipper area is going to move, because everybody remembers in 2016 November when Drives went from $5 a share to like $120. The exact same time, I found out this was one of Tim Grantani's biggest losses. Straight from his blog, he lost about $180,000 on Drives. Let that set in for a moment. He lost $180,000. A very, very good trader at the time, who's already worth millions of dollars, got caught into the dry squeeze. What me and Tim both know, because I've talked to Tim about this now, is it was a trap. And that's the trap that we're looking for. We're trying to find the reverse stock splits that trap the shorts and makes stocks do $120 move. So the question is it possible? What can we find out? We are trying to find the little thread that will be able to find us the next supernova. And that was a question. It always was running in my head. Now, there has to be some way to find this out, because I'm seeing like ducks making big money on a supernova, and everybody's talking about it. But nobody knows how to predict a supernova. A supernova, to define it, is a stock that reaches 300 to 600% in just a few days and makes a whole sector move. Not all supernovas are built the same, but there is one thing that I noticed is that most supernovas, not all, but most supernovas have one thing in common, and that's a super low float because of a reverse stock split. Because once I found out that was a common thread of most supernovas, not all, that's when I became obsessed with how could I predict this. And that's how I fell down the hole with this. The next portion of my life, I decided to do crazy stuff, mad stuff. I'm gonna flip this around to actually get my face on this here. So give me 1 second. There we go. And I decided to put my whole account up into the supernova of testing out reverse stock splits. And when I did that, I was starting to obtain my biggest loss ever, which was a $12,000 loss. When I hit this $12,000 loss, going on based on this theory, all of a sudden, SEC filings really matter. Like, I dove into SEC filings like a madman. I went to the ASPEX research website and I printed out every single long twits on there. I printed out all the SEC filings that all the companies he referenced to, and I just poured over and over and over of them. And the way ASPEX written his whole site, the way he written the whole site, nothing was in order. So I had to create order to the chaos that he created. And I kind of was drawing maps and trying to make sure I printed everything. I spent, you guys know I own a bakery, but I pretty much shut out the bakery. I locked myself in my house, and for about 2 or 3 months, I just concentrated on this, looking for this answer that I thought I had this theory with. Luckily enough, Tim always talks about the T-3 when you short a stock and they pull in the shares. Luckily, I held through the rip of the stock that I was dealing with, and looking at $16,000 loss, $12,000 loss. Finally, when my shares got called in, I finally had a $4,000 loss. Talking about putting fire on your butt to read SEC filings. So that's what I did, and that's what I hope you guys will do, looking for the answer that I've come to. The other thing too is this book sold short. I have little tabs of references to the story of an SEC filing. So I'll highlight it, I'll highlight the reference to the SEC filing, I'll go to the company, and then I'll read that filing that he's referencing. So the cool thing about this book sold short is it has little bitty stories of a stock that he shorted, and it gives the whole story of it. Then he references the SEC filings, and that's how you're able to find out the story. So this and ASPEX are my biggest influences on SEC filings. So let me get back to my screen.
That's cool stuff. I love the way you drew that connection with the book and back to ASPEX. So
yeah, man. I mean, like when I first joined STT Pro, you gave that Twitter list, and in that Twitter list, I looked at ASPEX stuff and I blew it off because it was too much reading. And then like a year later, I looked at it and I was like, oh shit! If I would have read this a year ago, things would be totally different. So, I mean, it's such a big deal. So let me go back to my main screen.
When you do that, when you switch back and forth, wait like 5 seconds because it kind of has to buffer. So
all right, it looks like we're back up.
Yep, there you go. Yep. Just give it a few seconds, and then that way it catches up. Yep.
So this is an image I took when I was going over the ASPEX research, and it's kind of like memories of this whole process. One of the biggest things that's kind of bugged me through the stock trading, nobody's really shared their story on how they learned, what they did. matter of fact, I remember asking Doug, I was like, how did you study for this? What made you like put that grain of thought in your mind? And he goes, I just studied. And I'm like, well, that doesn't really help. So at this time, I believe I'm the first to figure out or be able to predict what stock will actually be able to move. I know a lot of traders I've talked to, they know the whys, but they've never put together the real reason why when one reverse split take off and the other one will not. So the biggest thing that we need to concentrate on is float. What is the float? What does it really do? The float is a always evolving, changing number. When we talk about float, float is never the same. Now, like let's say, for example, like an Apple or a Google, the floats pretty much stay pretty constant. But what they are doing is they're releasing shares into the float slowly but surely for example, employee incentives. So they get an employee bonus. And those little numbers kind of add to the float. Let me pull up a list of reverse splits. Okay, so one of my favorite tools is Thinkorswim On Demand on here, and here's the on demand part. Now, what I want you guys to kind of look here is these are all the reverse stock splits of 2016. There's going to be a lot of them. And you'll see all on here, and Thinkorswim has shares, and it has this shares is equal float. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change the time. I'm going to go back to 2016. And the cool thing about Thinkorswim is it updates to the float at that time frame. So here's all the stocks of 2016, and as you'll notice, the float changes. It's always contracting and expanding, and that's the thing that's interesting about float is that this happens, especially with the junk stocks that we trade. So I'll pull it back off of on demand. That one concept of knowing what float does as expanding and contracting is extremely important when you're looking through the stocks. Because if you see a stock that has 100 million float, and then all of a sudden it has 20 million float, why did it become 100 million float? So these are kind of like little, like the breadcrumbs that come along with it. So a good company would do like a split forward of the float, like a Google or an Apple, for example. Apple split the stock forward to reduce it from being a $500 stock to down to a $50 stock, so it was more able for the general public to be able to buy it. A reverse stock split is another way to change the float of a stock, and that's kind of what we specialize in with the junky companies that we're dealing with. And what they're doing is they're diluting the stock. What I mean by diluting the stock is they're selling stock to a third-party company, and it's their responsibility to sell that stock onto the open market. And what they're doing is they're flooding the market and diluting the stock to the point where you become another Dries, where now it's from a 5 million stock float to a 500 million stock float. Buybacks is a healthy company, and that's what's been happening a lot in the bigger stocks recently, especially with all the new tax breaks. Is these companies are now reducing their float, adding value to it by buying back the stocks. So that's what they're doing on there, and that's a whole different topic. What we must understand is we must understand the ecosystem that we are dealing with. The biggest thing is stockholders' equity must be a minimum of $2.5 million. The other thing is a stock must be traded above $1 for 10 days straight on the NASDAQ. The rules for New York Stock Exchange is different. their stockholders' equity must be a minimum of 6 million, or their total market cap of 50 million, and at least a minimum of a 1 million float. So the way they do that is they times the stock float by the current price, and that gives them their float. If you can't be above the 50 million requirement, then they can get NASDAQ delisted. All companies want to stay on the NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange because these companies are such horrible companies. The only way that they are going to make money is they're selling warrants and they're selling ATMs. And that's the way that they're financing everything. We got here as a stock, they just did a shelf offering of $100 million. They need the money back. And so they are taking advantage of their stock going from $2 a share to $30 a share. And they're going to dilute the hell out of it pretty soon. But we got to understand that this is the dynamics that they are actually doing on it. No matter how good the PR is, cash is king. And stocks don't pay bills. The only thing that pays bills is the cash. So they have to be able to get the cash to pay the bills.
Well said.
Yeah, cash is king. You can't pay your electrical with stocks. The tools that I use to be able to find the splits. The cool thing about this whole process is, like, when you're doing all studying with Timothy Sykes, and he talks about all these different types of stocks, and then he's talking about gap ups or gap downs, or Tim Bertani's talking about gap up or gap downs and shorting a stock. You know, how do you find those stocks to be able to do your research on to see how that stock did? Nobody's keeping an archive of gap ups. Nobody's keeping an archive of gap downs. Nobody's keeping an archive of first green day, second green day, multi-day breakout. Nobody is. There is one section that there is an archive of. That's stock splits. So let me grab the stock split list. Here we go. So this is on Fidelity website. They go back years on here. And you can go previous month, and you can be able to grab this information. So one of the original things I did was I was based upon one of my theories was the higher the stock split, the greater the chance of a supernova. So I handwritten all these stocks and kind of went through month by month. But there's actually a cool little trick that you can do. And you can copy them, take it to the top, copy that, then you can take a brand new Excel sheet. And then you can paste it. And then from pasting it, you can edit what information you want to keep in here. And then you can do File, Save As, and the type of file. So the type of file you want to save it as is it's called a CSV file. Once you save it as a CSV file, you can then import it into Stocks to Trade. You can import it into Thinkorswim. And if you have questions on how to do that, YouTube import on how to do importing. So that's a really big thing to help me out managing the data of what I'm looking at. So the other place that I would use as well is Yahoo Finance. And then Yahoo Finance, they have a calendar of stock splits. This is a little bit more difficult to go through because it's individual. You have to go through day by day, and it'll tell you how many stock splits. there is actually a good 1,000 or so stock splits a year. So not all stock splits are created equal, but you have to go through here and try to find out what stock split means something and which one doesn't. The other one is on Thinkorswim. Grab it, bring it back. Is under Market Watch, I believe it is. Yep, Market Watch calendar, and you have your stock splits and earnings and stuff. But I look for stock splits. Now, even though you have all these different sections of high and reverse splits, they don't pick it up because sometimes a company like Himini will do a stock split on Friday, announce it, and it's immediately the next day, or like a Thursday, and they did it the next day. So that's where on our scanners with stocks to trade, where's my screen? You'll see something abnormal in here where you have a 500% increase, but the chart itself it shows just like a big old giant gap in there. So let's see if we can find a recent one. So yeah, so you'll have let's find. Here we go. Here's a stock split. So it's trading below $1 here, and then all of a sudden it's gapped up. And so you want to know why this gap up happens, and that's it. And you'll see like a 5,000% increase. So those are the ways that I collect my information looking for a stock split. All right, so we talked about CSV's file. The most powerful tool that I have found to be able to hunt the reasons for a stock to do stuff is Stocks to Trade. Stocks to Trade is the only platform that I have found where you can go back to 2015 and it holds the data, whereas like it was that moment in time. It just takes a little bit of time to load. Maybe one day the programmers could be able to put a date request time frame to go to that date quickly. But this is the only tool that I can be able to go into, for example, Drives, which is the legendary stock, where I can go to 2016 and find out the data that happened that forced the stock to do the supernova that it did. As a matter of fact, I'll load it up here so you guys can kind of see what I'm talking about. I really want you guys to be able to take ownership of this whole reverse stock theory. Each of us is a different kind of trader, so each of us may have different ideas. Some of you guys may be more advanced than me. Some of you guys are new. So I want you guys to be able to follow your own rabbit hole on how to figure out what's going on with these stocks, because you may come up with a better idea than me. But this is what I do. So we're going to November 2016. And this is what makes Stocks to Trade Pro, in my opinion, the most powerful system to be able to do your research and to become a better trader. Is because you get to see at this moment in time all the news, all the Seeking Alpha articles, the SEC filings, all that type of stuff, to be able to figure out what in the world happened at that moment in time. Nobody else has this all together like this. So we're going to get out of here and go this away. So to me, Thinkorswim with the on-demand and the stocks. So we got to know the story. And I was talking about the way you find the story is...
Next Princess Bride.
You like that?
Yeah.
It's a story, you know, and that's where the Sold Short book really comes in is because we got to know this story. Why are they doing what they're doing? Nobody talks about the SEC filings pretty much across the board. It's the black hole of the lessons that we get. Okay, so give you guys a thing. I got a stock that I've been researching. Let me grab it here. It's an upcoming reverse stock split. It's SYN, so we're going to use this as our upcoming stock split example for you guys to break down. So,
Is that all made up?
okay, so this is a pretty good amount of information on SYN for the SEC filings. Just to let you guys know, you can also go to OTC markets as well. I will use that when I'm using stocks to trade to go through a stock. So the first thing is I don't really dig into every single SEC filing. What I do know is because I've already done the legwork is I know just by looking at these filings what the stock is already doing. 10Q is a quarterly report. 4 is some type of buying or selling of the stock. And 8K is some type of information that's happening with the company. And S3 is some type of filing that like a shelf filing that's going to happen where they're going to do an offering of some sort. An effect means something in the past they're putting into effect, which usually means it's some type of offering. You have an S3 and you have an 8K, and what's happening. I know with the stock because most likely they're talking about the reverse stock split that they're going to do. But the effect is pretty important to find. In this particular stock, because I've done the research by reading everything, this company is riddled with ATMs and warrants, and they're hurting for money. And the way you're going to find that is by going through these steps. So let me pull the OTC markets in. So an effect here is a reference to another filing, May 13th, Form S3. In other words, they made it effective. S3. So S3 here is now, what am I looking for? I'm looking for what they're doing, and they're making warrants available. So you guys will need to read, and as you guys go through the ASPEX research and the Sold Short, how to read these warrants and what they're actually doing. Now here's something that is what I always do on all stocks before I trade them, is I go look for the most recent 10K or 10Q. And in here, I'm looking for the first thing I'm looking for is common. I'm looking for this number right here. How many floats is how big is a float is the stock? The next thing I'm looking for is stockholders' equity or stockholders' deficit. In this particular company, they're negative $5,109. The big thing that we talked about at the very beginning of this was what's the ecosystem that we're dealing with. 2 rules of stay for NASDAQ. Minimum stockholders' equity has to be $2.5 million. The company is negative $5,000. Okay, so in the world of business, it doesn't matter if it's a bakery, restaurant, doesn't matter if it's a technology company like what Tim Bowen had. There are federal regulations that we all must follow with the business. I have a health inspector who has to come in to my business, and if a customer complains about cockroaches or mice or whatever, they have to come into my place of business and they have to check it. Now, if I was a bad restaurant owner and I was having a hard time making ends meet and I couldn't pay a pest control guy, I would be spending my time kind of fudging along the process, trying to keep my doors open with my restaurant, with it, and hiding this or hiding that, or if I was dealing with a pest control issue of some sort and nobody could see it in the back, but in the front side of it, I'm selling these baked goods. I mean, we all see that in the red green reports in any hometown city. What happens is when the inspector comes into my restaurant, they tell me, Chris, you got cockroaches. I'm like, how can you tell? They're like, well, you see all the shell casings from roaches and we got complaints. You're going to get shut down. And I'm like, what can I do to get out of this? I'm like, well, if you can fix the situation in 1 hour, we only red tag you for 1 hour, you can open up the place. Or for example, my walk-in freezer is no longer a freezer and it's sitting at 75 degrees. I can get that tech into my place and spend the money to get to my place and fix the freezer, but red tag me because it was higher, but got it fixed and they'll let me continue on operations. There are certain things in the stockholding world that nobody can get around. Either you do it or you don't. You have to have $2.5 million in stockholders' equity. If you don't have $2.5 million in stockholders' equity, you will get a notification from NASDAQ and saying that you are delisted. NASDAQ will then tell you, what are you going to do about this? Well, the company says, I'm going to create a plan. And my plan is I'm going to do a reverse stock split, which will put my price for my share at $10 a share. Then I'm going to I have this finance company of Joe Schmo who's willing to give me $100 million. In exchange for that, I'm going to give him a ton of shares of stock. He will be able to finance it himself, and I make $100 million, and now I'm NASDAQ compliant. So NASDAQ says, great, you have 180 days to make this happen. So that's what they do. Now the company is setting up with $100 million in their stockholders' equity. But now what's happened? Well, the company who gave them the money, the $100 million, which what's happening with here right now, got to get its $100 million. Well, what are they going to do? They have shares. They have thousands upon thousands of stocks, either as an ATM, which they can just pour it onto the market, or they're guaranteed a particular price on the stock. Let's, for example, 58 cents, which is with SYN. You can read that in the warrants. SYN has to get above that minimum, and they have to dilute their stock with a minimum of 2 million shares. So, just like we saw with Himini, Himini did a reverse stock split of 1 to 250. That brought their price up to $30 per share. Now it's 7 cents today, within 1 week time frame. What did they do? They poured all these shares onto it, and now they reduced it. Well, NASDAQ is going to say, yo, you guys are still not NASDAQ compliant. And they're like, well, we got the 100 million. Yeah, but your share price is still less than $1. Well, no problem, we'll fix that. What's your plan? Well, they'll say, okay, NASDAQ, my plan is we're going to do another reverse stock split. We're going to do the reverse stock split up to a 30 to 1, and now we're at a $5 price. Well, NASDAQ's going to say, great. As long as you trade over the $5 price for 10 days in a row, you're going to become NASDAQ compliant, and you already have your 100 million. You're good to go. Here did that. They did a 7 to 1 reverse stock split, and now they've gone on a tear from $3 a share up to $30 a share. Well, now they are going to do a dilution because they need $100 million. If we understand what these guys have to do, not what they promise or not what the PR says, but what they have to do to stay NASDAQ compliant, you know what they're going to do, right? So the reason why they have to stay NASDAQ compliant, and we'll take, for example, SSH tests, is if they lose their NASDAQ compliance, they are no longer able to do an ATM, which is an at-the-market offering, and they can pour shares onto the market, and they no longer can do a warrant offering because they're no longer valid. So because we know what they have to do, we know what they're going to do. And it's a repeated cycle over and over and over. The question is, where on the cycle are they? So instead of trying to dig through drives, and I want you guys to dig through drives, I want you guys to go through STT, but I'm going to tell you exactly what drives did, and I will pull it up here. Okay, so Dries on 10/31/2016 announced that they were selling the investment, right? They also did a reverse stock split. They brought their split down really, really low to, I think it was, let's see if I have my notes on it. I have different set of notes. They brought the reverse stock split down to around 2 million shares, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, if I remember right, it was maybe 1.5 million or something.
Yeah, 1.5 million. So they brought it down, and this is where the shorts get excited because most reverse stock splits with bad P&Ls like this just drop down. And so a short will jump in there and they just take that right down, right? But what was different with Dries this particular time was they had no financial obligations. They did a reverse stock split, but they didn't have any offerings set up, they didn't have any warrants set up, they didn't have any ATM set up. Then they announced at auction they bought something else. Good news for the company, caught the shorts on the wrong side, and all of a sudden it just went like a rocket. This is the trap that we're looking for. So what we're really looking for is we're looking for stocks that, where do they lie in the 1 year time frame? Because if they don't do the stuff they have to do in a 1 year time frame, because they get an extension, the first one's 180 days, and they get the financing. Then they can file another extension and see if they get their stock price up. Where do they fall in this time frame? So SSH became CHEFs, right? They couldn't complete it in 1 year time frame. They became delisted. They called the company quits. They called it a different name, and now they're back on NASDAQ. That's the process that we're looking for. So where do they fall in line with this whole thing? And if you can find a company where the reverse stock split, I'm not going to give you that answer because I want you guys to do the research. I want you to own this. I want you to follow down the rabbit hole. The question is, what float do they need to be at to be a reverse, to be a supernova? One stock, and I'll give you the ones to look at. There's going to be ABIL and BIOC. What was their float that made them become a supernova? What was the stockholders' equity that made them become a supernova? Where were they on that place of that time frame of 1 year to become a supernova? The next thing you guys got to ask yourselves is, what was the volume? What was the decrease in it? What was the top tick? What was the difference in it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys an Excel sheet to look up. Now this took me a long time to develop this this Excel sheet. And let me switch screens here for you guys. It took me a long time to create the Excel sheet because I didn't know the framework to put what I'm looking for. Now I know. So I'm going to pull this up. Okay, here's my empty Excel sheet. I have mine full of hundreds of hours of data that I did all the research for and to figure this out. But I want you guys to have the structure of the Excel sheet. The first line of it is symbol. The next is split ratio. The date that they did the reverse stock split. The 10K before the reverse stock split that they did for 10Q. What was their stockholders' equity? Volume date. That volume date is the date that something came out. The days until news. This is really important because a company will sit on the reverse split, creating their moment going to pump the stock up. This is the one time that we can know a pump is going to happen because they have to pump the stock. They have to get the price. So what do they have to do? They have to release some type of news, some type of PR. BIOC, their PR was the worst PR I've ever seen for a reverse stock split, but it made it go. Days squeezing. Now this is a good one. I put this in here because, like for example, here has been squeezing for about a month now. Whereas like BIOC only squeezed for a few days. ZSAN squeezed for a total of 9 days, whereas TNX squeezed for 1 day. This is important information because this will tell you how long can you really hold on to the stock. What's the industry? You will find a very common thread of what companies or what industry do the most reverse stock splits and have the most supernovas. But remember, Dries did a reverse stock split and they ignited a whole sector, which was shippers. So just because you find one common one doesn't mean it will always be the shipper or biotech or chemicals or gas. All these companies can be in different sectors, but the same situation will happen. I do the price before stock split, and then I do a price at stock split high. To me, this is a very important information. I take the high tick of the day of a price split high because there is a percentage decrease on average before a news is released. So you can kind of watch as a stock price drops, and you will see what the percentage decrease is. Day before the price. This is to me a very important. And what I use is I use the closing price of that day. So my two constant numbers are the price stock split high with the top tick and the close of the day before the news. Then there's my difference, and then that's my stock's percentage decrease. I now know within a really good time frame of when news is going to come out based upon percentage decrease. Top tick. The top tick is the highest the stock got to during the squeeze. The difference and the percentage increase in the type of news. The news does help when you kind of look at will it make it run or not. I like to know the volume of the day. Now the one cool thing about knowing this is this increase here is we get to find out how big of a squeeze we normally get on a stock. The highest squeeze I have recorded in my Excel sheet is 721%. Imagine that fact. Could you imagine being ahead of the game where you get a 721% increase on your money? So let's just say, for example, in theory, you buy the day of the news of, let's say, at $5, you know within good reason it's going to squeeze 700%. You know to take profits along the way. Hell yeah, you could make $40,000 on one of these trades. All right. Now, my favorite thing is last year's float, the last reported float before the split, and the float after the split. To me, this gives me an extremely good idea of what I'm looking at and what kind of stock it's going to be, if it's going to be a dud or if it's going to be a supernova. And then the other one I like to know is if Dux was trading the stock. This helps a little bit to know if he talked about it. Okay, so that kind of pretty much sums up what the reverse stock theory is. The reason why I'm not giving you the answer is because I guys really want you to own the research. Through the research, you will start finding yourself looking through the SEC filings, and you'll actually read it, and you'll be hungry to read it, and you'll start knowing what the SEC filings truly mean. That is the only way I knew for myself, looking at a $16,000, $12,000 loss that made me so hungry that I wanted to get into those SEC filings. And sometimes that's what the motivation we need to dig into these filings. So I'm putting the carrot in front of you guys. I want you to know the possibility of giving a 700% runner is there. I want you to let you know that predicting the next supernova reverse flip is possible. I've done it, and I've made some pretty good money on doing it so far. Let me check a couple more notes to see if I have anything else to help you guys out with. I will tell you, during this hunt that you guys are doing, stockholders' equity is the most important number. You will also find that after you guys go down this rabbit hole, that you will know what stockholders' equity will mean no matter what stock you trade. And you'll know how to trade any of these stocks, not just reverse stock splits. ATMs, warrants. The on-demand is super key with Thinkorswim. And doing the research, the only place to do is stocks to trade. I think that's about it. So Apex Research, sold short. You got to do that homework, and then I'll take you down the rabbit hole. Hopefully, you will meet me on the other side. And then if you guys want to, you can always hit me up on Twitter, and I'll be more than happy to answer your questions, and we can talk about it. But I really want you to do the work before you ask me questions. I think that's about it.
Man, great stuff. So, man, I got work now. So I ordered sold short. I don't think I was ever familiar with that. And so what we're gonna do, the plan is, first of all, thank you, Tango. I mean, man, that's a lot to digest. We're at an hour. I think we're gonna have a ton of questions. I got questions. So what I would like to do is we'll digest this, rewatch it. I plan on rewatching it. I mean, there was a ton of stuff. Number one, man, Chris, you're such a great resource, man. I consider you a friend. You're a great team member. I mean, man, it's like the work you put into this is incredible, and preparing and being ready. Please, everyone, thank him. Rewatch this. I'm gonna rewatch it, and then I'd like to have kind of like maybe in September we'll do 3 months straight with Chris as the guest. Man, awesome stuff. Really appreciate it. And I guess see everybody in the morning. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.